The conference final is heating up and the playoff action continues to get more exciting. We'll break down the latest, plus how important is goaltending in the NHL playoffs. All that and more on this week's NHL Squad.
You are talking puck with the NHL Squad Show, sponsored by Game Time. From the Oilers to the Stars, Golden Knights, and the Panthers, the Rangers, Avalanche, and yes, even the Maple Leafs. The Locked On Podcast Network brings together all its local experts to provide the scoops, breakdowns, and comprehensive looks at all the NHL, with plenty of trash talk to go with it. Don't miss the hard hits and glove-dropping hot takes on the Locked On NHL Squad Show. It's time to drop the puck.
Gil Martin here. Welcome, everyone, to the NHL Squad. Sit back, grab your favorite beverage, and join us as we get you ready for another wild week across the National Hockey League. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. I want to welcome our panel today, Eddie Garcia of Locked On LA Kings and Zach Martin of Locked On Carolina Hurricanes, here to talk all things hockey. And let's start with the goaltending issue. I mean, we see the final four teams, and goaltending is sort of a little bit of a different story for each of them. How important is goaltending in the modern NHL if you're going to go on a long playoff run and even win a Stanley Cup?
Well, I mean, goaltending is always going to be important. I think maybe the question is, how much should teams invest in their goaltending these days? I think there's an interesting argument on both sides of it. But if you're looking at this year, obviously Sergei Bobrovsky is the only high-priced goalie that is still around. I think Jake Ottinger, as far as average annual value, is somewhere like 26th in the NHL, and guys like Stuart Skinner and Frederik Andersen are even below that, or so if you look though at who's won Stanley Cups recently, you've got Bobrovsky, you've got Andrei Vasilevsky, another big money guy, but then you also mixed in there is a Jordan Bennington or an Aiden Hill or somebody like that. So there's a different argument to be made, I think, on both sides of it. Goaltending is always going to be important, but for me personally, I would prefer my team not go all in on one of those big contracts for a goalie. I think it's just very fluid. You can get a good enough goalie, I think, to get you where you want to go if you can surround them with a better team. So yeah, goaltending is always important, but the state of goaltending is really good in the NHL. I mean, look, I still marvel at what Stuart Skinner is doing. He's obviously either amazing or not very good, but at the same time, they're getting by with him. And Calvin Pickard hadn't lost in the postseason until he got hurt. Calvin Pickard, and that's just a guy, So, right. Like I said, I would prefer if I'm running a team, I'm not paying big money for a goalie anymore. I think I can get a good enough goalie. I'd rather distribute the rest of that money around other parts of my team. I think I can still get it done.
Zach?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Eddie for the part where it's like you look at where these teams are at now. I mean, you look at the Hurricanes exclusively, talk about Frederik Andersen. I mean, him and Kochetkov together make less than $6 million. And, they're in the conference final. And this is after a year where people thought that the Hurricanes were going to take a step back. So I think you can get it done with some good net money if you got a good tandem to do it. Or if you just got, one guy that gets really hot at the right time. I mean, you look at, with Andersen, before going to the conference final, he was undoubtedly the best goaltender that, and he's still doing good. He still has a sub 2 goals against and a save percentage over .914. So it's just, you look at some of these goalies where it's like, okay, let's go get these high priced goalies and pay them a buttload of money. But it's like, where do you go after that? Especially with contract situations. Cause even then, they can be, good as up to a point where the team in front of them is. And if they have bad games and the team in front of them isn't good, then you're kind of just nullifying yourself. So yeah, it's good to have elite goalies, but if they have off nights and the team in front of them just isn't there, then what do you really look at? Igor Shesterkin, they threw him the bag. Rangers they didn't even make the playoffs. So what does that really say that when you give a goalie that much money and has a struggle season and the team overall struggled?
And then
Now,
you look at the three Vezina finalists. They're not around anymore. So, again, how important is it? Yeah, it's important. It's always going to be important to have good goaltending, but do you need to have that elite goalie to be able to get you want to go? I think there's some pretty good evidence that says you don't have to pay big money for those goalies. I mean, I would love to know if you gave, the powers that be in Winnipeg truth serum, if they would still want to re-sign Connor Hellebuck to that contract. I would be guessing they would have a lot of buyer's remorse on that.
well, especially because he seems to not keep his standard of play up in the playoffs. There are goalies who are like Binnington is hot and cold in the regular season, seems to raise his game in the playoffs. Hellebuck, it just seems so far the track record is the opposite, especially on the road.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt.
Yeah, and that's just kind of the thing where it's almost you're turning into a league where now it's more of tandems, because we all saw how it was in the 90s and 2000s where these goalies are getting like 65, 70 something starts and their backups get maybe 5 games, and that's pretty much about it. But now it's just the level of competition across the board, or every team's got star players and guys who can score, a lot of goals. Now it's like it's harder on the goalies, because now you can't expect these guys to play so many games because some injuries might happen or stuff like that. So now you almost have to have a backup that could be a 1B compared to your team's 1A. So I think now you're seeing that trend of you don't have to have the elite of the elites. You don't have to have like a Patrick Waugh and some dude behind him, or like Martin Brodeur and just some guy in pads. So I think goaltending is definitely important. You need to get those guys that are, above average, maybe to start goalie levels. But if you're talking like one of the top 5, which is hard to get anyway, at that point, you have to hope that they're that all season, not just the regular season. So it's a big gamble to rely on one guy for everything.
And yet, you do need at least a goalie who gets hot at the right time. But how do you know your goalie can do that? I mean, when you take a goalie making, $3 million a year as your starter, how do you know that goalie can turn it on and raise his level of play come April, May, and June?
I mean, it's a good question. I guess if you look at a guy like Stuart Skinner, he's one of those guys who he does have some mental toughness to him, right? He has had his struggles here and there, but he always seems to be able to, if he gets another opportunity, he bounces back pretty strong. So he's kind of shown that ability that he's one of those guys that he might have a couple of bad games here and there, but if he gets another opportunity, he usually makes the most of it. So there are certain guys who have kind of shown that, but you're right. I try to remind myself of this every year and I don't do a good job of it. The regular season is so insignificant when it comes to the playoffs, and we try and predict these things and we try and look at who's going to be the teams to beat, and things change so much from the regular season to the playoffs. Just taking my own LA Kings for example, the whole regular season we whined and complained about how bad the power play was, and the power play was great in the postseason and it didn't matter. So it's so unpredictable, really is so unpredictable, and goaltending can be a big part of that too.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, because you look at the talk about $3 million goaltenders, Gil. I mean, Frederick Anderson missed pretty much the whole season for the most part, got 20 something starts. He comes in and just goes absolutely lights out. Even the conference final where he had a tough couple of games, but you really can't put that on him because the team in front of him just wasn't good, making a lot of turnovers and stuff. But you used to look at his stats, you're like, if he was on any team that wasn't hit the worst rough spot at the wrong time of the season, they'd be praising him a lot more. And I think you look at the fact that he's got 2 shutouts this playoff alone. It's, if you know the track record of your guys who are calm, cool, and collected, like how Anderson's been this playoff, even back in 23, if you have enough evidence to go off of, there are some guys who are like, hey, we'll give you this amount of money, but if you're willing to, give us the flexibility to go surround the rest of the team with, I think you can find that good mix of having that really good goalie, but also having the really good team in front of them to have that nice combined grouping to where you could make runs like this.
Who do you guys think is the last goalie who kind of stole a Stanley Cup for a team? And it even could be a good team, a team that's really a quality team, but the goalie just stood on his head and they won a cup?
Well, I mean, Jonathan Quick was pretty amazing for my LA Kings back in 2012. Won the Conn Smythe Trophy and put up some postseason numbers that were amongst the best of all time. So from a personal standpoint, that one pops into mind. And remember, the Kings that year were the 8th seed. So that's some pretty decent evidence of a goaltender. Certainly, it's always a team effort, right? It's never just going to be one guy, but when a goaltender is that good, it makes a big difference.
I would even say too, even with the teams that that kind of went off on with the Kings. I mean, look at Corey Crawford. He gets very little recognition for what he did for the Hawks in the playoffs. And, he lost 2 Conn Smythes to where even his own teammates afterwards said he should have gotten it over them. So I think if you're looking at a goaltender who really stole some series and stole some cups from teams, even with the team in front of him was really good, I think that there should be a little bit more shine on Crawford for what he did in Chicago.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Do you think Binnington fits in the category of a goalie who helped steal a Stanley Cup?
I think his name deserves to be brought up. Yeah, I don't think it's out of place to bring his name up for sure.
Yeah, that whole 19 Blues team was just an anomaly of how you can go from dead last to winning the whole thing in half a season. So yeah, I mean, you definitely put Binnington there. It's just after that's kind of like, is it really? Because the Blues haven't really, shown enough evidence to be like, hey, this guy can go do it multiple times. Right now, it's just one hot summer, and that's kind of about it for the Blues. But I could definitely see Binnington being there for the most part to be in some conversations.
All right. Well, we have got a lot more to discuss on the Squad Show today. Let's talk a little bit about playoff formatting because it's something that a lot of people have complained about. We'll go there. We'll talk about a lot more coming up on today's Squad Show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. What would it look like to combine live prop bets mid-game based on how the action unfolds? Check that out at FanDuel.com. If you're new to FanDuel, this is the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Again, that's FanDuel.com. And if your first $5 bet wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Eddie, I'm going to start with you on this one.
I figured you would.
I figured you knew. The playoff formatting and the way it's been done right now, do you think they're better off going back to a 1 versus 8 conference-wise? Because your LA Kings, for example, have played the Edmonton Oilers 4 years in a row and lost to them, unfortunately, 4 years in a row. Is it time to mix things up a little bit in that respect?
I think so. And I also think the regular season should mean a little bit more than it does in this current system. And as much as I was excited to see Tampa Bay, Florida in the first round and Dallas, Colorado in the first round, it's not really fair to those fans to have to face a team like that in the first round after the regular season they've had. Plus, maybe it would be different. I understand the reasoning behind it, and I can certainly say the amount of hate I have now for the Edmonton Oilers is very high, which, that's what Gary Bettman wanted, right? He wanted rivalries. And I get that rivalries can be made in the postseason or help to be made in the postseason. At the same time, I certainly know Kings fans don't want to see the Oilers again next year. And I'm guessing even Oilers fans probably don't want to see the Kings again next year, even though they've had all the success. It's just, we've seen it before. It's let's mix it up. Let's have things be a little bit different. And I know people will say the argument of, well, a lot of times if you look at how it is and you rank them 1 through 8, it kind of is pretty close. It's not as drastic as you might think it is, although this year maybe that's not a good example because of Dallas, Colorado, and things like that. But I would be in favor of going back to 1-8. Like I said, I'd like to see the regular season be a little bit more beneficial to teams who have really good regular seasons, and also not having to see a situation like Kings Oilers for 4 years in a row, and God forbid 5 years in a row. Because I mean, look, it could happen again next year. I mean, I think the Kings and Oilers are both expected to be playoff teams again next year. You never know, but I would say that that's not an outrageous statement to make. And if it happens again, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it again. Not in the first round, please.
Zach?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Eddie. I mean, and not just because it's the Kings Oilers every year. It's just even for, if we're going for our particular teams, I'm tired of seeing the same group of guys that we keep seeing every year. Devils, Rangers, this year the Capitals for the first time in a little bit. It's just no offense, Gil, the Islanders. It just gets so mundane after a while. Like, all right, let's just talk about these teams once again after how many seasons in a row. And it's nice to have that 1v8 backing because you don't have to manufacture rivalries. If you see the same team at different points in different rounds, and that rivalry is going to be there regardless. And I think that's what you kind of saw for a lot of the years before they went into this divisional matchup. And like Eddie said, it just the regular season doesn't really matter because you can kind of just walk your way into a third place in your division and get in if the rest of your division is not that great. So then it's like, yeah, you might have some drama at the very end, but that's more for like wild card stats. But even you could still have some drama going for the 7-8 seeds and figure that out. Then you're still getting the top team against number 8 because I mean the Kings were an 8th seed and they made the Cup final. I mean the National Predators, beat the Blackhawks when you're in the playoffs. I think it was the 16 one, and they were an 8th seed as well. And they still went on to the Cup final. So it's you can have really good series even past the first round. Just, you see a lot of these teams get bounced so early that could have had longer runs, and that's just tough for fans seeing their teams have great regular seasons. And it's like, all right, go up against this other great team in the first round rather than like a conference semifinal or a conference final. Now it's like, all right, here's your first round exit against a team who you really shouldn't be seeing for at least another round. But it's just one of those things, unfortunately, where it's if there's teams who had a really good regular season, but they missed out because they missed it by a point or two, but they finished better than some other team did, then that's just the unfortunate part. So I get the argument of having divisions, the format, so you can have more rivalries, but you don't have to manufacture that. Hockey fans can make rivalries, and even the players take it to another level as well without having to be like, all right, we're going to force it where you could potentially have the same matchup back to back seasons. It just after a while it just gets kind of old, and you're into the same storylines of, well, this team's beaten this team 3 years in a row. Can they finally do it? It just runs into you're recycling the same things over and over again.
Now, there is some talk, again, surprise, surprise, about more expansion in the NHL. Atlanta may get a third shot at an NHL franchise. We've heard Houston mentioned, a few other places as well. Do you think the NHL, if they do add 2 more teams, do you think we see a play-in round to the playoffs, much like the NBA has done? And is that a good idea?
I'll let you go first on this, Zach.
Absolutely not. If you want to get expansion, fine. It's just luckily the talent's a little bit there now where you can kind of spread it to other teams so that it is possible. But playing rounds like the NBA, then your regular season doesn't matter. Like the NHL should never take anything the NBA is doing, because you saw the All-Star game this year was the absolute worst. I think it's just the play-ins makes your regular season mean nothing, because okay, now you have 2 other teams that could get in. So here's your 9 and 10 seed fighting to get in to do what exactly? Because then now your 7 and 8 have to play the 9 and 10. So now you got more teams making the playoffs in air quotes. And it's like, what's the point then? Because then you got teams who were slightly out now getting there. It's almost like the bubble season without the bubble part of it. And it's just, it was fine for that 1 year because, you didn't want to have to figure that whole situation out with a bunch of teams that were close and they wanted more rounds to make more revenue. But if you're talking long-term, playing rounds for the NHL makes no sense because then you got to extend the playoffs a lot longer than what you can do with the regular season because now you're going to have to add in a lot more games, even if it's a best of 3. That's still a lot more of extra hockey to kind of figure out TV-wise, ticket-wise, and stuff like that. Playing rounds for – if when the NBA wants to do that, fine, because that's whatever. But when it comes to hockey, no. Just keep it 8-8. Figure out the format. Playing's just – it will just dilute the regular season, which it doesn't need.
Eddie?
Yeah, I totally agree. Look, I don't think they should expand. We've got enough teams now, but it's going to happen because owners want the money and players want more opportunities at jobs. So I've made my peace with the fact that this is going to happen. We are going to add 2 more teams in the near future. So good for Houston or Atlanta or wherever else they may end up to go. I have nothing against those people getting hockey. I love to see hockey expand into other areas. Obviously, we've got Carolina represented here. LA was not a traditional hockey market way back when, even though they were an original expansion franchise. So I'm all for seeing hockey in different places. I love that. But I would prefer they don't, but it's going to happen. Again, like I said, I've made peace with the fact it's going to happen, whether I want it to or not. As far as expanding the playoffs or having a playing round, I completely agree with Zach. I sincerely hope they don't do that. I just talked about how I would like to see the regular season be more important when talking about the matchups, so that the same thing follows with this. Make the regular season mean more. Don't make it easier for teams to get in the playoffs. I know that also means more money. So that's the way things always are going to land. But I'm very much against it, and also even more so would be against some sort of playing round or any kind of an in-season tournament that the NBA is doing as well. No, let's not. I know Gary Bettman at once upon a time came from the NBA, but obviously that's long past now. Let's be our own. Let's have our own identity. Let's not copy everything the NBA tries to do. And it's kind of ironic that with the success of the 4 nations now, maybe the NBA wants to copy something that the NHL does or do something different because, as Zach mentioned, that their all-star game is, and most all-star games have become very uninteresting. So expansion will happen, but let's not expand the playoffs. Let's not have any kind of a play-in tournament. Let's keep it where it is. Everyone universally agrees hockey playoffs are the greatest of all the playoffs. Don't change it. Don't mess with it. It's fine the way it is. Keep it that way.
Yeah.
All right. We have got more to get to on today's show. We're going to talk a little bit more about physicality in the playoffs and its role in teams' success. We've got that and more coming up on this week's Squad Show. So, guys, we are now roughly halfway through the conference final round, maybe a little more than around the 2/3 mark of the Stanley Cup playoffs overall. Zach, I want to start with you on this one because the Florida Panthers are the defending Stanley Cup champions, and they play a very physical style of hockey. It seems to have gotten off to a good start in their series with the Carolina Hurricanes right now. How important is physicality to playoff success?
I'd say it's definitely important, especially when you want to try and impose your will and impose your system on the other team because you really don't want to be bullied and you want to control the tempo. And Florida in the first 3 games definitely did that. They made the Hurricanes uncomfortable, just being able to do what they needed to do, got into their skin, made them frustrated, got them out of their game. And physicality plays a big role, and that kind of leads into the mental game too. Because if you're physical and you frustrate the other team, then it turns into a mental warfare too. Because then they're going to start, doing things that are out of character, making, unnecessary turnovers, taking unnecessary penalties. If I know how to speak English, it's just one of those things where it's very important. Now, of course, there's only a certain line you can get to before you start going into now you're just hurting your team type of territory. So I think you find a good balance that's definitely there, and that's kind of what you saw from the Panthers. And like for the Hurricanes, they kind of stop getting bullied themselves and kind of impose their will. And that's, kind of what you saw, after game 4. And now it's now a battle of wills, battle of who's going to blink first and what system is going to fit back and whose system is going to work better. So yeah, I think physicality does go a long way. Some teams have to match that, because if you don't match it and you just kind of get imposed on, then yeah, your series is going to be very tough for you, because now you're having to fight not just the physicality, but then of course the mental game that goes against you, because now you're not playing your system and you're making mistakes and you're exacerbating all the stuff that's going to get you exposed.
Eddie?
Yeah, it's absolutely crucial. And I think Florida certainly has shown how important it is to be physical, to, also it's, to wear down your opponent. The playoffs are such a war of attrition, such a grind. And, to make it all the way just to the Stanley Cup final itself is such a grueling thing to do. If you can be the more physical team and wear down your opponent, and if you can use your depth, if you've got 4 lines you can use and those guys can all have a physical part of their game, I mean, it just wears another team down. Look, Sam Bennett might be a $10 million a year player because of what he brings in the postseason and because of what he can do physically. So money talks. And if that report is true, that there's some team out there willing to give him $10 million a year, and I'm not trying to knock his skills. He's certainly a very good all-around player, but you don't think of him as a $10 million a year player. But it's about the playoffs. It's about postseason, right? I know my LA Kings could use somebody like that. We haven't had a player like that since Dustin Brown back in the day. So I know they would be looking to probably get somebody like that. They went out and got a guy like Tanner Jeannot in the offseason to try and fill that role. Unfortunately, he was hurt, didn't play in the playoffs. I'm sure that didn't help the Kings as far as their chances to advance as well. And you look at some guys that are willing to embrace that role and how it's helping them. Look at Zach Hyman for the Edmonton Oilers. That guy is not thought of as a very physical guy. He's been hitting everything that moves in this postseason, and it's helped his game. He's become an impact player. He's been more engaged in what the Oilers are doing. So if you're willing to pay that price, if you've got guys that are willing to do that, I don't think there's any question. It really, really can help your chances at advancing in the playoffs.
Eddie, I wanted to start with you on this last question. You talked about making the regular season mean more, and part of that was doing the 1-8 thing. Is there anything else you think the NHL can do to make the regular season and success in the regular season mean more to the teams that get it?
Well, they're already rewarding your conference champions, right? So I don't know that there's anything else that they could do there. I think the 1-8 is enough. I don't think it needs to be anything more than that. I'm not sure what else it would be. I'd be willing to listen to any ideas on that. Nothing wrong with having discussions and things like that. And Zach's rubbing his hands together. Maybe that's a universal sign of I have an idea. But at least 1-8. At least get to 1-8, and then we can. I'm willing to listen to something else.
Zach, what else you got?
No, I completely agree with the 1-8. Keep it as it is. That's what you need to do if you want to go into that direction. But if you want to make the regular season more meaningful, how about the 3-2-1 point system? Nullify the guys who are going to be the merchants to get into the postseason based on how many overtimes and shootouts you lose. Nothing against you and your team, Gil, but you guys are very good at merchant, just getting all those overtime losses and getting like 11, 12 extra points in that. But I think you've seen, the PWHL has done it perfect with their 3-2-1 system. You see other leagues do it the same way too. And I think that would be, now you're rewarding teams who actually go get it done in the regulation instead of, in the, overtime and stuff.
Did they do that in Four Nations as well? Four Nations did that this year? Is that?
I believe so, but I'm not 100% on that. But I want to say yes, but don't quote me on it. But it works. I mean, you've seen some other leagues do it where it's like now you get the teams who actually win in the regular season mean more in regulation rather than be like, okay, if we just take it to the overtime, so be it. We're only going to lose out on 1 point. We're still going to be close. But now it's like, no, if you want to get the extra points to get yourself a little bit more ahead, then yeah, you want to pick up those full 3 rather than then you're getting 0. Then you're really going to have to push for that because it just doesn't make sense to me how we still have this.
Yeah.
I've always been in favor of that, but I also know the reason it's not going to happen. And that is, or it's unlikely to happen.
Yeah.
The league likes to artificially keep the standings close. So, if you get a loser point and the other team gets 2 points, so you get to like March 15th and there's 12 games left, and you're only 6 points out of a playoff spot. Now, it's almost impossible to make up those 6 points, but it sounds close. And so you could sell tickets based on the fact that your team is so close to a playoff spot.
Or how about this? Or how about this? Just make a better roster so you don't have to worry about all those points. If you
too logical, I'm sorry.
Yeah. If you want to get more points, make a better roster. Actually do something. Stop just being like just middling around and just gathering draft picks like you're going to do something with them. Like actually try. So if you want, I think the 3-2-1 would work if teams would actually just try to make rosters.
Makes too much sense. I don't think we'll see.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot what league we're talking about for a second. Logical doesn't really. We don't do that here.
There you go. There you go. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for making the Squad Show your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. You could find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Gil Martin. I want to thank Eddie Garcia and Zach Martin for joining us today. Have a great week, everyone. We'll be back next week with another exciting episode of the NHL Squad Show.